I'm Caroline Miller, your host of Just Read It. This is a book talk show where Pacific Northwest writers or West Coast writers discuss New York Times bestsellers. And today we are going to be discussing Miss Eliza's Kitchen by Annabel Abbs. This is a Victorian, I guess we would call it, literary biography. The facts are true, but the author makes up the scenes and dialogues that are missing. And I have two wonderful guests today. Adrienne Flagg is a writer, a playwright, a splendid actress. She had the lead in my play, Women on the Scarlet, what was the name? Woman on, I don't know, Scarlet Beast. Woman on the Scarlet Beast isn't that awful. Well, anyway, you did a bang up job, Adrienne, and thank you very much. And the second guest is a doctor, Esagui. Esagui, did I get that right, Veronica?
Esagui, yes.
Esagui, okay. And
just Veronica, yes.
Okay. And Veronica is a longtime acquaintance of mine. In fact, she had a book talk show where I guested, maybe 10, 12 years ago. Anyway, it's nice to meet again with you, Veronica. First, let's start with Adrienne, my leading lady. Welcome. And Adrienne, I'd like you first to tell the audience a little bit about yourself. What are you working on and what's going on in your writing life, artistic life?
I am a performer, producer, director, and one of my favorite things to do is to work with playwrights and actors to develop new material. And sometimes that means me participating in writing it as well. I try to avoid it because it's way scarier than I think anything a performer could do. It's the solitariness of it and the loneliness of it is really hard. So when I do write, I try to do it collaboratively. And right now, I just did a show last night. I just performed last night with Bridge City Improv. Didn't have to write a thing for that or memorize any lines. It was very fun. And I'm working with a writing partner. We did a project together with a whole group of other people called Note to Self. And he and I are working again on a new play that kind of is an intersection of chosen family, grief, and what's happening with housing, particularly in the Portland area. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like the perfect little pressure of all those things and how it can break people apart or hopefully bring them together. We're working on it. Okay. But I also did a project with Vanport Mosaic, which is an amazing nonprofit here in Portland. And they did a play. I was part of the first read through and development of that called Martha Bakes, which was about Martha Washington and her attachment to the kitchen and also her relationship with, in particular, one of the enslaved women that she had a relationship with.
Oh, that's going to be a good background. Yeah.
So this very much resonated with me, but my passion, besides working in the theater, has always been food and cooking. My favorite game to play since I was about 8 years old was restaurant. So I used to love to read cookbooks as a kid. I would plow through these cookbooks and then put together a menu. Friday after school, my mom would take me grocery shopping. And then Saturday, it was like all day cooking. I could sometimes rope my friend Andrea in to be my sous chef. And then at night, I would have a restaurant for my parents, complete with signage and menus and everything.
I've seen your recipes on my Facebook page, and I wish we lived closer to one another. I'd love to have you as a neighbor. Okay, let me get Veronica in here, see what she's been up to, then we'll tackle the book. Veronica, I think you're working on or have a new book just out, am I right?
Yes, it's just about ready to be, out there into the world. It's called The Marie Celeste, The Solved Mystery of the Ghost Ship. It's my very first historical fiction, and it's taken me over a decade to write it, because when I first started writing that book, I wrote it in Portuguese, which is my first language. And I was helping another author in Portugal who wanted me to do the co-writing of that book with him. It turned out that he did plagiarism, and he took the book and put his name on it. It's a long story that came about, anyway, I kind of like explored a little bit of that into my preface in the book, so people know what happened, what went on. And so it went from a couple of pages to 100 pages and so on. So I did a lot more of a historical research, which is one of the reasons I loved Miss Elisa's English Kitchen, because she did so much research. And when it comes to a historical book, I did a lot of research. And so I appreciate all the background that she gives us in the book. Luckily, when I wrote before that, the books that I wrote before that was the diaries. I didn't have to do much research because they were my own life story. And but even the very first book that I wrote, which was growing up in Portugal, it has to do with Miss Elisa's English Kids. So I'm very connected with the author, with Annabel Abbs. Okay. So right now I'm doing chiropractic, still full-time. I'm a chiropractor. And in the book, the Marie Celeste is just about ready to go. Probably in about a week or two will be out there.
Okay, great. Well, we'll look for that. I think I read one of your earlier books and enjoyed it very much, and had a journalist who was very critical normally sing your praises when she read one of the books. So I hope the audience will be intrigued. But now let us turn to the book. Now, the book we're talking about, as I said, is Miss Eliza's Kitchen, a Victorian novel where the central character is a 30-something-ish woman who, with her family of three sisters and a mother, have fallen from the middle class into the lower middle class because the father has gone into bankruptcy and fled to France. Two of the girls are farmed out as governesses, one married well, but the oldest, Eliza, wants to be a poet. And the mother wants her to get married. So that's the internal mother-daughter struggle. Eliza meets a publisher who says, women don't write poetry, but if you write a cookbook, I would be interested. And so begins our plot. And she and her mother run a boarding house. So Eliza sneaks into the kitchen and starts working on recipes and hires a woman called Anne Kirby, who is abjectly poverty with a demented mother and an alcoholic father. But the two women, though worlds apart in status, hit it off, and they write one of the first classic cookbooks in England, which iterates into several editions. Adrienne, give us your take on the book. Would you pick up any good recipes?
Oh my goodness. I was absolutely charmed by this book and really surprised. I had never heard about this particular story or this particular cookbook that inspired this novel. And it just, it opened a whole world for me. I love how every chapter is connected with a recipe, and that recipe is so integral to the story. It wasn't done in like a clever way. It was really, it was very deeply needed in the story to have that recipe. But it was also kind of fun to go back and look at like, oh, why did she choose that recipe? What is that recipe also telling us about the story? So I really enjoyed it. I was also really impressed how fleshed out both Eliza and Anne's lives were, and Anne, what she had to hold in her and what she had to not talk about was a remarkable burden. And it makes me think too of a lot of young people that I've worked with. I've taught theater for years, and some of the stories that they're holding, that we have no idea how much they're holding just to show up. And yeah, so that's kind of.
Well, it turns out that Eliza has a little secret. We can't tell the audience, but it ends up causing friction between the two partners, if I can go from with Anne and Eliza. So there's that. Well, okay, you're leading us in a direction, Veronica. Besides a cookbook, this is triangles of women. There's the mother and Eliza and her sisters, and then there is the relationship of the two women of different lifestyles. Would you say that Abbs gave us some insights into how, like, well, mother and daughters relate?
Yes, and I believe that just about everyone has some kind of a story to tell about the relationship between a daughter and a mother. When I read this book about the relationship between everybody, all the different, what I call the diaphragm, it showed how important everybody has of a connection with each other, even if they don't realize that. Like Eliza and Anne, you'd think, oh, they're coming from different worlds, but yet they connected. And even though her mother, Eliza's mother, and how much power she had over that child. And it kind of reminded me of myself, of my mother and her sister, how they prearranged the marriage for me to come to the United States. That's why I came to the United States. So when I was reading this book, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're talking about me. She's talking about me and my mother. To me, this book was like, because I'm a chocoholic, it was like having chocolate, the most delicious chocolate I ever ate. Her words are so rich and so empowering. It's almost like, I know Annabel is not a poet, but she writes like a poet about everything. It's just amazing. I had to go back and reread the chapter just to get into the excitement. I mean, she's just as excited as the protagonists that are working in their book, you know?
Yes.
I would reread those food descriptions. Her food descriptions are just, they're so specific, and like you can experience it. It isn't perfunctory like a recipe would be, but it's also not like super stereotypically flowery. Like for me, as somebody who loves to cook, I'm like, yes, I know exactly what she's talking about in these food.
All right, well, let me, even though it is a cookbook, I found it, and I don't know whether you'd agree, it was really a psychological and sociological study. And I'd hate to say of the times, because I find women are so often in the same circumstance, you know, where Annabel, Eliza can't write poetry, but she can write a cookbook. But it was also a good look, would you say, Veronica, of class in society, because we've got these two women coming from different classes who have something in common, but then we have the treatment of the servant class. There's that wonderful scene, Veronica, where Anne has to go up and serve at the table of this boarding house and discover something. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
You mean about the gentleman that?
Yeah, well, gentleman in quotes.
Yeah.
Okay, but that is so prototype of the times. That's what I liked about this book, is that even though there weren't that many recipes in it, it was the flavor of it. And when you think of like when the different classes they either clashed or they worked together. And I grew up with a nursemaid, a cook, basically, like the book describes the lower class and then you were the upper middle class, and it hurts when you think about it. And so reading that book, it was also difficult for me to say, my goodness gracious, how horrible. And then looking up and saying, we've come a long way from these awful times.
Well, have we? And maybe Adrienne, you want to chip in on this? The scene that I was referring to is Anne goes up and is serving a gentleman, and while under the table, he's lifting her skirt and making free, and she does not, in her class, feel she can make any objection, so she endures it. But you know, when you think of Fox News and all of the women that who have been sexually molested by men in power, I wonder if we really have made much progress. What's your take?
Well, as somebody who worked in the hospitality industry, and I mean, I was exposed 3 times that I can remember, and that was like, you know, the tip of the iceberg compared to like some of the stuff that you experience working in the hospitality industry, which is that dynamic of you are serving someone, and that dynamic is still something very prevalent in our society. And I think the past few years that we've been like really exposing some of the power inequities that happen there, and what people have to kind of just endure and put their good face on. And but I think we are not as far along as we need to be.
Not much progress. Our time is closing down. Veronica, I want to give you last word. Do you agree or disagree with Adrienne's take on the status of women in today's culture?
Well, the way I look at it, from the way I came, when I came from Portugal in 1962, in order for me to get a charge card, I had to get my husband to get the charge card for me. Okay, so when I think about this book, it serves that era, and I do see a big, huge change from then to now. We still have a long way to go, but like I said, I enjoyed it truly because it took me back to those times. It's a reminder. The young ladies of now that are under 40, 35, 40, they don't know about this. This is almost like a dark story, but it isn't. It's historical. And that's why I love these books, because it's the true history of mankind. And that's what I appreciate about it.
Well, listen, this has been a discussion that should whet the appetite of anyone who's remotely interested in history, women's history. It's a profoundly deeper book than a book about cookbooks.
Cool.
Yeah. Initial reading. So, Adrienne, again, would you recommend this book to someone?
I highly recommend. Matter of fact, I've been telling everybody that.
Okay.
Yeah, I have some patients, they love to read. We exchange books here in the office. And I actually signed this book twice so I could read it again.
Wonderful. Okay, Adrienne, how about you?
I absolutely recommend it. I mean, not just from the cultural and cooking aspect of it, but I love how both women are tethered to their mothers.
Oh, yeah.
Figuratively, literally.
Yeah.
But then there is a bond of choice between the two of them. And I think that idea of liberation coming through choice in this is really rich. It was absolute pleasure. I was sad to see them drift away at the end.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes, that happens between friendships sometimes. Well, our time is running down. Again, Adrienne, your new project, the name of it is?
The name of the new project, it's a play called Change Order.
Change Order. And Veronica, the title of your new book, please?
Marie Celeste, The Solved Mystery of a Ghost Ship.
Oh, wow. Both of those sound like, well, I know I'm devoted to both of you, so I will be on board for your projects. In the meantime, dear viewers, Just Read It is in its concluding its 11th year. So if you haven't subscribed to us, please do. We publish every 2 months. You wouldn't want to miss one of these wonderful discussions. So come back and see us next time. Till then, this is Caroline Miller for Just Read It.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. This was wonderful. Thank you for introducing me to this book.
Okay. All right, everyone. See you in 2 months.